And thank you. Thank you for being here, Amber. This was really your idea, and I think we're going to keep it in. We definitely want to keep it in place. Share it with future student representatives. It's such a good idea. So, thank you for letting us know, and thank you for being here and for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I wanted to really create this space and sort of reflecting on my career in terms of what do I wish somebody would have told me, or maybe there were spots where someone told me and I didn't get it until later. And so I tried to sort of shape this presentation in that. So my name is Dr. Amber Kelly. I identify as a community psychologist, she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director for the Society for Community Research and Action. And I have some other roles as well that I will share later in the presentation. So when I think about looking back at my career and reflecting and sort of, it just was not this like easy peasy go one direction. Like it was sort of, in some instances, looked like this beautiful web. And in other instances looked like this confusing maze. Like I just didn't know where I was going. Like one minute I was going one way, another the other way. And it just seemed all over the place at one time. And so when I think back, one of the things that really started me in terms of thinking about what I wanted to do was in my career was thinking about my little brother who has cerebral palsy. And he one day came home and asked me, like, why am I different? And I just was like, what do you, I was flabbergasted. And I'm one of those people that you usually don't catch me off guard with a question. Like I usually got an answer, but I just was like, I just didn't know what to say because he was in a space where he was realizing that he was different from his peers. And that always struck a chord with me because I just never wanted other people to feel different and feel like they didn't have a place or they didn't matter. And so when I sort of started my career trajectory, I really was focused on being a clinical psychologist. Like that was my goal. I was going to work with other children. I was going to help them with their mental health. And so I started on that path, but it had its curves and its bumps and bruises. I asked my mom for this presentation to sort of, if she had to describe me, how would she describe me to other people, right? And sort of, and when she shared what she shared, you know, of course, you give the heart reaction to the text, right? But also when I think back, I was like, hold up, you saw something I didn't see in myself at that time. Um, and that kind of how the career sort of things happen, like those people that know you, that love you, sometimes they're going to see that little sparkle that you may not see at times because you are sort of going. And so what started sort of the first stop, I would say, in my journey was I was inspired by the show A Different World. It was a spinoff of The Cosby Show where Denise Huxtable attends the fictional Hillman College, which is a historically Black college and university as it's presented in the show. And I made the decision, I'm going to an HBCU. And when it was time to apply to college, I went on the Black College Tour. I only applied to HBCUs and I only applied to schools that were outside of the great state of Ohio. Um, and as my mother mentions, when I pretty much, you know, get my mind set on something, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I chose to attend Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia. I majored in psychology, minored in Spanish. And I was really set on doing and going to grad school for clinical psychology. The GRE had another idea. I took the GRE. I lost count, you all. I kid you not, after 5, because it just was like, whoa. Now, granted, that's over the trajectory of my career journey. And for the record, I never broke a competitive score. in that. And so I share that to say, if you are in this space of sort of having that challenge with having to sort of beat the GRE, this presentation will not help you do that. However, I will share just how that sort of showed me that, hey, I was supposed to do something different and I just was being stubborn. So in undergrad, I was involved. I was in the Psychology Honor Society. I was in the Beta Kappa Chi National Scientific Honor Society. I was Miss Psychology. I sung in Philharmonic Society. I was also a part of the research program that's no longer in existence, but it was the National Institute of Mental Health's Career Opportunities and Research Education and Training Program. A mouthful, I know. So another way to think about it was essentially, I got the opportunity to work with a researcher for 2 years to help me prepare for being in graduate school. In addition to that, I took specific classes that really honed in on my research skills, as well as helped me prepare for graduate school. Now, so, I applied to graduate school. When you're doing clinical, they say you got to apply to like at least 10. Guess how many interviews I got? Oh, Erin, thank you for that. 0. I got no interviews. No offers, no interviews, no nothing. So I'm sitting here like, let me get this straight. I worked my butt off in undergrad and I did summer programs. I did my summer research program at the University of Michigan. I did everything that was traditionally right. But here's the thing about careers. Career is what you make it. And there's no traditional one way to go about things. So I said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board here. All right, so I didn't get into grad school. What are my other options? So I decided to sort of mix my next option with sort of this, hey, I'm going to try something I'm uncomfortable with, leaving Atlanta because I loved Atlanta. But at the same time, I was like, I want to try something new. And I was not strong in the area of neuroscience, but I also knew I loved kids. So how could I find an experience that allowed me to be in this space? And so I did my post-baccalaureate fellowship at the National Institute of Mental Health for 2 years. And that was a very eye-opening experience because I realized, one, it was not my path to be a therapist. When I had the opportunity to work with kids, I loved working with the kids. But then I started getting these different questions like, okay, we're working with kids that have mood and anxiety disorders, and we are looking at their brain activation using functional magnetic resonance imaging techniques. And this is important and insightful work. But then and we were specifically having kids that came from really well-to-do backgrounds. And so then my question started becoming, well, when we look at what's going on in the world, what about the kids that are experiencing poverty, community violence? How is their mood and anxiety disorder different? And so from that moment, I'm kind of like, well, I accept that I'm not supposed to be, a clinician, so to speak, or maybe I'm still supposed to be because, all right, I'm a Black woman. There's not a lot of therapists that look like me. Maybe I still need to keep trying, right? So I'm on the fence here. And so, I took the GRE a couple of more times, right? And applied to a bunch of schools. Got one interview. And I had to make a really tough decision. So I got an offer, a PhD offer, fully funded, and I didn't feel like I could do the work that I was supposed to do in that environment because it was in an area that wasn't accessible to urban settings. And so I'm like, I want to do community work, but I'm going to have to drive an hour, 2 hours to do my dissertation and my thesis data. This is not sitting right with me. So I had to really figure out, okay, you've been working towards this goal and you're not even sure if you still want it. You know, you're going to be in this space for 5 to 6 years of your life, but you're not excited about it. So then I got another offer and I was more excited about that offer. So I had to make a decision between my PhD and my master's. And it was hard and it wasn't. It was hard in that, like, you know how many people would want your spot? Like 300 people applied for this spot and you got it. Like, go for it, right? But then another one was like, you are more excited about the work that is being done at the master's program than you are at your PhD offer. So when it came down to it, the master's won. So I was off to Baltimore. And I forgot to say this at the beginning of my presentation, you will see various references to television, movie, and R&B because that is a part of who I am. So I was off to Baltimore. I went to Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and I got a certificate in health disparities and health inequality. And while I was there, I did health disparities work. And I did research with children that were exposed to community violence. And this is when I started to realize even more so that trying to go back into a clinical may not be the right fit. So then I was like, well, maybe it's clinical community that's my jam, right? So why don't we apply to those programs after this experience? You got your master's, great school, you've gotten all this experience while you were there. You did more than just be present. You tried to really embrace this experience. Apply to grad school again, no offers. So what do you do when you're at this place of, I think I figured out what I want to do, but the door is not exactly opening, right? And so, I was all over the place. I'm like, well, I applied to Peace Corps, I got in, but I turned it down. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. But then I was like, well, when you're lost, you're confused, explore the unknown, explore this uncomfort position. Like, there's a reason why this is so uncomfortable. And I decided to be open more to other things outside of clinical, because when I had the chance, I didn't do it, right? And when I applied to clinical community, I didn't get in there. So it's like, okay, maybe now is the time to say what you thought was your purpose, maybe something totally different. So I decided to retreat to my safe space. I went home, I lived with my grandma, and my grandma, very support, all of my family's been supportive in my career, let me say that. But at the spaces that I was in, I just needed to sort of take a pause. And so I decided to go home to the woman that makes the best blueberry muffins with blueberry sauce that would feed me those things, that would give me the strength to figure this out, right? So I'm back home and I'm looking forward, I'm like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I decided to try to find a nonprofit job because I was like, well, I think the sector for me is nonprofit. So I get a nonprofit job. I'm working as a program developer, grant writer. I wrote grants, got grants for other organizations, for the organization I was working with. One of my biggest projects was getting the infant mortality conference funded for the first time for the org. But what I also realized in that space was that I wanted to transition to more leadership roles. And the reason being, I felt that there was a disconnect between people in leadership and the people that organizations are serving. And so I said, all right, well, what does this really look like for me? I don't know. So I'm in this space and I'm doing this job. I'm about to get laid off because it was RF funded. So my role was for a specific amount of time and I didn't have another offer on the table. So what do you do when you're about to lose your job? You travel the world, right? So that's what I did. I got certified to teach English as a foreign language. And I minored in Spanish. Spanish is my second language, although I'm a little rusty right now because I don't have anybody to practice with at home. Um, and I made that decision because one, I always wanted to just travel, right? And I'm like, well, I'm about to lose my job. I'm not tied down, you know. I'm at a place where I can just live it up and I can just explore the space. So I decided to teach English to high school students in Spain. And that was a blast. I really enjoyed doing that. And then on the weekends, I went to other countries. So, you know, I might be in Rome staying at a hostel, and my family did not know the meaning of what a hostel meant until after the fact. Because imagine trying to tell your family, oh, by the way, I'm going to travel to this other country by myself, and I'm going to stay in a hostel, and I might be rooming with, oh, I don't know, somebody I don't know, just while I travel. So my mom, you know, my dad, my brothers, they didn't, grandma, they didn't, all, grandparents, they all didn't find out about that part of this journey. But I really enjoyed the space to just enjoy life and experience all the new things that I got to do. Um, I also taught adult students on the side, because since I had my TEFL certification to teach English as a foreign language, other schools were willing to hire me on the side. So I literally worked at the high school. Then, you know, I also did some evening stuff, and I enjoyed the siestas of Spain because everything shut down. So it was just this moment of break. And it was just one of those experiences that I'm so glad that I took advantage of, even though I was still not sure what I wanted to do with my life, right? So while I was in Spain, I had some revelations, some ideas. So I'm like, all right, let's go back to this. You want to be a nonprofit leader, right? One of the things that I recognized was that I didn't know enough about the sector to actually be influential in that space. And so I'm like, okay, let's go back to school. Yeah. Let's go back and I'm a lifetime learner. So going back to school is not a big thing, but financially it's a big thing. In terms of one of the challenges I've had throughout my career is finding full funding for my education. Most of the funding that I was able to receive was during my undergraduate years. My graduate years were a different story. And I did everything I could to try to get funding. But one of the things I just accepted was, if I'm going to be in debt for something, I'm okay being in debt for my education, because once I earn it, you can't take my degree from me. So I was okay with that. So after that, I'm like, well, where do you go? You know, you're like, you want to learn about nonprofits, you want to do community work, you know, you want to be in a city. So where should I go next after this journey of being in Spain for 10 months? Well, first I did go back to grandma, if that was your guess, right? I did for a minute before my next trip. So I make sure I say that, because I think she's on this call. And so I ended up in Chicago. And so here's the reason why I put this picture of Chirac on here. My family supports me and loves me, but was concerned about me being in Chicago, right? And for loving reasons, right? Because at that time, even though this movie came out after I was in Chicago, but essentially, you know, this fear of being in this space because of the community violence that was taking place in Chicago. And so one of the things I had to really be honest about was, I didn't want to be one of those people that I was not willing to be in the spaces that I wanted to impact. And that was my frustration throughout my career, when I saw people in leadership positions that were not, that never did any community work. So I got into DePaul's public service program. I applied to their accelerated one because I'm like, hey, I did a master's in 9 months. I can do another one in 9 months. Let's get it, right? There was not enough people that had that same enthusiasm as myself. So what happened was that I had to do a 2-year program. So I was like, all right. I moved there, y'all. I had no job. I all I had was like, okay, I knew I was gonna get money back from these loans, so that's how I'm going to live. Like I literally lived in my studio apartment, didn't really have a lot of furniture yet. Got my first job as a community outreach coordinator for a local nonprofit in Chicago that focuses on nursing home advocacy and Illinois Citizens for Better Care. And I did that for 2 years, working in various communities, really working with the family members and loved ones for those that lived in these facilities to help them be able to advocate for better conditions for their loved ones. And I loved doing that work. I think that really reignited that community interest that I had, that this was, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And then also during that time, I decided to embark upon learning about program evaluation. And so I started to work on a project with Chris Keys and Judah Viola. Judah is at National Louis University. Chris Keys was at DePaul, Emeritus. And that project really ignited something different that I hadn't considered. Like, would I like to really explore doing this more on a frequent basis? So that specific project was for Medicaid managed care, and I was working with managed care companies, working with caregivers, working with providers, and case managers to understand, okay, what is your perspective of this program? And looking at it on so many different levels. And we did qualitative focus group interviews. And so I got the chance to understand qualitative data analysis while I was working on my second master's. Then we were coming home from a project. I was writing with Judah, and he was telling me about National Louis University. And Judah's a faculty member there. And so I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued here. And at that time, because I had already had a master's, DePaul, I kind of canceled out on some of the classes, like their research methods and think another class. So I was like, well, let me take another elective. So I ended up taking an elective in community psych. And I just was like, my world just opened up. I'm like, this is it. These are the values that I embody. This is the type of work I want to be doing. So all of this happening at the same time. Like, I'm taking community psych, and Judah tells me about National Louis University. And so I decided to apply. I got in. And so I was working my first year of my PhD program, mind you, just so you understand my sort of landscaping here. My first year of my PhD, and I was also finishing up my second master's. So I did that at the same time. And I think I was working like 2 different jobs at the time as well. So I was a little busy, right? I was a little busy. And so I did some other jobs while I was in Chicago to really get me that experience. I had my first sort of leadership role in the space of program evaluation. And I was like, I really love program evaluation. So I'm like, and I love nonprofits. And so let me try to see how can I sort of bridge those together. So I had that experience. I worked as a case manager during the time of the Affordable Care Act. So I was traveling to different communities, helping to educate members about the Affordable Care Act and what that meant and what that process looked like. And so one of the things I learned in that space was I was not really good at sort of the cranking out numbers thing. So I got this sort of directive of, okay, you have to meet these many numbers and sign this many people up. I didn't do that, right? I was that person that was like, okay, I want to take the time to educate you and give you sort of the resources that you need to make the decision that's best for you. And even though you may be in this space of, okay, you're eligible for Medicaid, but what happens when you're not? And so this is the other piece of it. And so I was that sort of person that really wanted people to have that education. So it was like, I was great at that piece, but my numbers, luckily I was on a team that like was able to meet the numbers because, mine just didn't, I missed the mark. But even in that, I saw that maybe there's something more to this education piece that I really never fully explored. Even though, yes, I did teach in Spain, but even after that, I wasn't like, okay, I want to come back and teach in the States. I was like, I'm good, right? And so then while I finished my program, it's time to sort of figure out what my next steps would be and just sort of taking all of these tools. But it was time to close the Chicago chapter. And the thing that got me to do it was really thinking about what experiences that matter to me. Like you have to, throughout your career, sort of figure these things out. And for me, I wanted to have experiences that were important. And I really didn't want to deviate from that because what I realized in that is that certain spaces were not for me. And that if I could not see the community impact, I didn't want to be there. I'm like, well, why am I here? Because apparently my vision and where I want and what you see as and what this space should be, there's a disconnect. So I really want to hone in on this creating the experiences and even in graduate school. So for example, I wanted to get publications. Judah was my advisor. And so I talked to him about, hey, I want to, work on this. I want to, have this opportunity. And so we co-authored things together to get me that skill. For my dissertation, I chose to use a national data set because I wanted to hone in on my data analysis skills. Remember, be uncomfortable. So I knew I wasn't comfortable in stats, but I wanted to get better. So I wanted my dissertation to be able to do that because I used the national data set. So I had, the insights, but also using that set, I was intentional about making sure I got my dissertation published as well. And so I wanted to make sure that all of my experiences, I got something out of it, even if I didn't like the experience that I had. I can tell you my very first research experience, y'all, was with rats. And that was my first and my last time working with rats. And I'm not saying because the rat bit me, but that probably played a role in my decision to not work with rats and decide to keep with people. But in each of these experiences that I've had, I decided to make sure I took a nugget from it. And so with Chicago, I started to realize, okay, if I'm strong in this education piece, how would I be at teaching on the collegiate level? And so I decided to teach online basic statistics. That was the opportunity that was available. And it's like, okay, I like that level of stats. I knew that, but I didn't necessarily like going into the advanced stuff. I didn't think that was my sort of gift in terms of teaching. But I learned that I really enjoyed teaching in this space. And I taught that particular course for 3 years. And I learned so much about myself in that. I transitioned to other courses because now I'm in the space where I want to teach courses where I can really focus on more of an applied and the different experiences that I've had in the various roles that I had. And so as I'm reflecting upon my Chicago and trying to curate my next thing, it was time to, go back to home. And this time it was not with my grandma. It was with the love of my life, my husband. I married my high school sweetheart. And so while I'm in this space of Cincinnati, it's great to be back home with my family. But then another job sort of needed to happen. So my new job was looking for a job. And I initially thought, okay, Amber, you're not a horn tutor, but let's assess what you can bring to a setting, right? You have the community experience, you have your doctorate, you have 2 masters, you have program evaluation experience, like you have all these different things that make you uniquely you. Now, I don't think I translated that the best when it was time to look for a job because it just was like, I wasn't really sure what type of space I wanted to do. So since I previously worked as a director in the program evaluation space at a nonprofit, that was sort of like the next like logical step. But then what I started to see and realize in myself was that, yes, I love nonprofits. Yes, I love program evaluation. I don't love them together, meaning I don't want to be the one leading in that space, because for me, I felt disconnected from community, because what I was finding in this space was that the organization, yes, they cared about the data, but getting community feedback and using that data to inform program design and implementation was not at the forefront. And so I had to sort of kind of check myself here. Well, I mean, what do you want to do? The decision was kind of made for me because I got laid off, right? So I was like, well, I got a little bit more time to sort of figure this out now because, hey, I don't have a job. And during this time, what happened was something sparked in me, because I was able to get a grant to do a project in my old neighborhood. And that really sort of got me back to that community space. And so now I will play the video from that project. And can everyone hear the sound okay?
Yep. We did at first. Oh, did you pause it?
I did. I wanted to
Okay,
make
yeah, we did.
Okay, perfect.
Family Flickin' is bringing the movies back to the community. So Bond Hill is where I was born and raised, where I went to elementary school, where I spent a lot of my time growing up. And so where we're having the movie is at Mercy Health, which used to be the Showcase Cinemas, which when it left, families really didn't have an accessible movie theater. And the premise of the event is allowing families to come back here to where the old theater used to be, to get that old feeling and be able to watch movies with their families on party buses. And one of the biggest challenges with going to the movies is that it's not really affordable. So that's why this event today is free for the families. We just ask everyone come and just have a great time with each other. So when families arrive, they'll register and sign up, and they'll get a ticket to get free refreshments. And then they will get on the buses when it's time to board the bus. And since you have that small, intimate party bus, you can get to know other families and really have a good time.
We were moving and we were in a bus watching TV on the bus.
It was great. I was glad he got to interact with a bunch of little kids and have a good time, go around the city for a little while.
Well, the bus was, I like the bus better because it was like a little bit more intimate rather than being at a movie theater and you like looking around and it's like, it was like all these families and it's like we from the neighborhood, like, so it's good. Like we seen a few families that we know, so it was good for us.
It was awesome sauce.
A lot of times now, because of just the day and age, you know, Netflix, Roku, we don't really get out of the house as much for the movies because it's not affordable and people just prefer to stay in the comforts of their home. So come out, it's a beautiful day. I just want everyone to just enjoy and have a great time. Have a spiffy time, a family flicking time.
And so this project, I wasn't able to continue during COVID. I did this a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. And essentially, my vision was that communities would come together to watch movies in their old neighborhoods, because a lot of the theaters were going to places that you couldn't get to easily. And so I didn't necessarily envision repeating it massively. I envisioned partnering with other communities to help them structure what this could look like in terms of what I learned from having to get licenses and things of that nature. And so this was a passion project that I'm happy I got to do, because it did lead to other things. But for now, it just sort of is sort of chilling, I guess is the best way to describe it. Oh. One of the things I also realized about myself was that I am not one that can be confined to just one setting. I need to be in multiple spaces, because that's just who I am. And so I got to this place of, okay, I know I love community work. No, I love program evaluation. No, I love nonprofit. What do I want my career space to look like? Because I didn't want to have something that was quote unquote traditional, where you go in, you leave, come home. I was just not a 9 to 5. I want something flexible. One of the things you've seen throughout this presentation, I talk about my family a lot. And so although my career does matter to me, I value them more than my career. And so I need a career that allows me the opportunity to spend time with them. And so for me, I've figured out what works in terms of what this bouquet of flowers looks like for me. Because I say, and I tell people this all the time, instead of saying, oh, I have all these different hats, I say, hey, I got a different flower. I got a different petal in my bouquet. And so I decided to create my own nonprofit. Because I just didn't see what my vision was in the nonprofit sector. So our mission is to foster human-centered connections through community-engaged events and research. And so I wanted to create what I didn't see with the intention of closing, meaning, okay, we're launching, we're doing different initiatives, but once we've achieved our goal, we're closing our doors. Because one of my personal frustrations with the nonprofit sector, that there is this constant cycle of trying to get money for programs that communities don't care about, but organizations are still getting the money for it. And now we're shifting where funders are more so requiring this community piece in order for you to even apply for funding. I'm seeing that be more common. And so Family Flickin' fits under this umbrella, even though I haven't been able to replicate that at that same intensity. So another project that I've also been working on under this space is that we've gotten funding to do community engaged research that focuses on the mental health and support needs of African-American women living in poverty-stricken communities. And so we're at this phase where we're wrapping that up in terms of our data analysis, but essentially worked with different communities to partner and learn, what does this look like? What does this mean for you? What does stress, coping, mental health, what is that for your community, for you, for your family? And I'm excited to be able to present that later this year. One of the things that we did present last year is essentially, I'll get to that. So I want to hone in on this piece here. If you have an idea, you have it for a reason. It's your idea. It was planted in you. What you decide to do with that idea is on you. Okay. It's so easy for people to try to be discouraging when you have an idea and you share it with people, or in some cases you share it with the wrong person. But I really want to reiterate that there is a reason for that. And I encourage you to sort of try to tap into what that is. So an idea that came to my mind was, okay, there is sort of this disconnect between, there are community members that want a BIPOC provider for mental health, but there's no way to know who that is and assess that. So our organization created the first BIPOC mental and behavioral health provider directory within Cincinnati. Really excited. So far, last time I checked was maybe like 130 people have accessed it. One of the questions I asked in sort of the download, and it's free to download, by the way, is that, hey, would you share this with other community members? And so people are sharing this and getting it out there. And I'm so excited that it's a resource that is available, that people are using within Cincinnati. And I hope that it manifests into something else, not necessarily something that our nonprofit has to do, but my pie in the sky would be it be a collaborative effort, that it is something that is a staple that continues to grow and build and fit the needs of the community. So when I want to sort of go tie into what's all my flowers, all my flower petals. So I'm currently, I adjunct for 2 universities. I adjunct for National Louis University, and I teach in the Human Services department. And that allows me to really be able to share my experiences within the nonprofit sector. And I also am an adjunct for the University of Cincinnati. I teach their community involvement course within the psych department. I am the executive director for the Society for Community Research and Action, as well as I also work as a consultant. I do projects that I feel matter. I'm not one that advertises that I'm a consultant and constantly trying to get business. Usually people sort of come to me with a project, and if it's a good fit, meaning my values, their values, and the intentionality behind the work is on point, then I'm good. And then I also mentioned I'm a founder of a nonprofit. So that's sort of my diverse framework there. I encourage you to figure out, what is your why? For me, I have many different whys. My why is that I want to see change the way things have been happening in certain spaces. And just when we think about the policies and community needs, it's just not okay for me. And so that's part of my why. My why is also the things that have inspired me. I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, my brother, his journey has helped me, not only just in my career journey, but just my personal journey as a human being. And then also my family. I'm a wife, I am a bonus mom, I am a granddaughter, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm all these other things. And so it's important for me that my whys are always apparent and at the forefront, that what I do allows me to merge all of those things together. Essentially, when you think about how you want to curate your career, you're the author of your story. It's your choice. Create what you want. I didn't see what I wanted in one space. So I'm like, I'm just going to create what I wanted in different spaces. And finally, I'd like to dedicate this presentation to my younger brother, Napoleon, who I lost last year. If it wasn't for his love and support and each of my journeys moving me to all these lovely different cities, I may not be able to be with you all today. So I just want to dedicate this presentation to him. And now I will open up for any questions. And if there's any questions that you don't want recorded, just say pause the recording, but take it away.
I came in late, so I missed a couple parts of it. But my main 2 questions are, what was your major in? And then what are your masters in, if you can repeat that? And then when you were traveling, did you travel through a program, or did you just travel like kind of by yourself?
So my major as an undergrad, I was a psychology major, Spanish minor at Clark Atlanta University. My first master's is from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. I have a master's in health science and public mental health and a certificate in health disparities and health inequality. And my doctorate's from National Louis University in community psychology. When I traveled in Spain, I did go through a program. I'm not sure if it's still in existence, but it was through the Council on, it was, the abbreviations were CIEE. And so that program allowed me to get the placement to teach at the high school. But when I got there, I had to sort of, not but had to find my housing. So I had to figure out finding a roommate. So that's the whole, that was interesting. And then as far as me traveling to the other countries, I pretty much was on my own. I'm one of those people. It's like, well, if I want to do something, I don't necessarily wait for somebody else to be available to do it with me. I just do it.
So have you always been this enthusiastic about your career and the things that you picked along the way?
No, especially when I hit the walls, like the GRE, I was just like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life because this is what I thought I was supposed to be doing. So definitely when I felt like there was a door closing or I had an obstacle, I definitely went through that phase of really like, don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm not as excited as I should be.
All right.
Mhm. Yes, Michelle.
I know I already spoke, but I'm kind of like personally right now, I'm in a very lost space. I feel very like stuck and I feel like I have no guidance. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on where I should start. I really have absolutely no idea what I want, but I'm majoring in community psychology right now. So if you have any advice for me.
Yeah. One of the things I had to do when I was stuck was ask myself, what am I interested in? Like, what do I actually like doing? I knew I was not going to inject rats for the rest of my life. That was not my calling. But I knew I was interested in other things. I just couldn't put it all together. So I knew I was interested in kids. I knew I was interested in education. I knew I was interested in all these different things. So just take the time and just say, what do I like doing? And even in your coursework, when you think about the stuff that you're required to read, what's the stuff that you're like, hey, I want to dive into this deeper. I want to dive into this more. What are those topic areas? And explore those more and see what happens.
I have a question about if you could explain more about what nonprofits truly are. I think you touched on it a little bit when you said applying for funding, but then also, how do you know if a nonprofit would be for you? Because I keep hearing about it and I feel like I want to do something more in my community, but I'm not sure in what way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So simply, when you think about, so the nonprofit sector in general is essentially designed to serve a specific purpose and a specific population. And you can gather what that is by looking at the organization's mission, vision, and value statement to understand better what that looks like. And so when you hear that term nonprofit 501 something status, most common more C3s, but there's so many different tax identifications. But what that means is that you can donate to this organization and it's tax deductible. So they are positioned in a place to receive donations. However, those donations must go to the organization. And in terms of the second question, can you repeat the second question for me?
Yeah, it's how do you know if a nonprofit would be for you? Because I'm not sure like how you get paid or if you get paid or whatever, but I do know that you have to really have a passion to like dedicate time towards one since it is focused on like one topic.
Mhm. So with a nonprofit, you can get paid. Now, it may not be necessarily as much as you would be if you worked in a Fortune 500 company. So nonprofits can get paid by the donor, so they can use that money to create a staff position to fund someone. They can use grant money that they receive to pay someone. They may have a structure, an endowment that can be used to pay someone. And so when thinking about that in terms of which one is for you, there's so many different ones. So I would say start with one that is focused on a topic that you're interested in. So if you're interested in hunger, look into those sort of nonprofits. And then from there, look at their annual reports and their website to have an understanding of what their mission, vision, and values are. Now, sometimes, and I've experienced this in my career, and as a result, I have selectively not included the names of some of the places I've worked. But essentially, you can think that it's going to be one way, and you get in there, it's a whole nother thing. And I experienced that a lot in my career where the values that an organization was conveying were not the values that they were exemplifying within the organization. And so for me, that is sort of my point of like, nah, I'm good. I'm at a space where I'm only going to occupy spaces that see my value because I know I have value. All of us do, in any space that we occupy. And if a space does not know, see, value, and appreciate that, for me, it is not the space for me.
Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one more question for Dr. Kelly. Go ahead.
Do you also have any advice on, like, I'm right now in the I'm a senior right now, so I'm in the transition of like trying to be more professional and like proactive. Do you have any advice on how to approach being professional but not too pushy and like asking the right questions and kind of saying the right things, especially when you're not really sure where you want to go?
Yeah, I would first say be true to yourself when you're reaching out. Just like, hey, if this is the space that you're in, just being honest. One of the things that has been helpful for me is just trying out different spaces. I personally don't like networking things. It just doesn't sit right with me. Like, oh, I'm here to advance me and you're here to advance you. So let's just all come together and advance each other. And I have occupied those spaces because I was told as advice, like, hey, go to networking, go to conferences. And yes, these things serve a value. But when it comes to sort of presenting who you are, present who you are. Because that is the essence of you. I used to be real boggled down on that too. Like, oh my gosh, I need to make sure I got the suit, got the make sure, and I normally I wear my hair different ways, mostly curly. I usually don't have it straightened, but I wanted to be in spaces that really I could just be me. Like if I have to fit a mold that's not me, you're not going to get the best me. You're not. You're going to get what you think I should be, which really doesn't work. So I would also just even thinking about, hey, just in terms of this quote unquote professional, right? Who really establishes what that looks like for everybody? I know I mentioned my hair. So one of the things I had to come to terms with is like, I'm going to wear my hair the way I want to wear my hair. And if you have a quote unquote issue or you feel it's not professional, that's your problem, not mine. As long as I am not doing anything offensive or harmful to other people, how I wear my hair should not be of concern to you. And frankly, there are a lot more important things in this world that someone could put attention to how I choose to wear my hair. Just for example, that was something advice I had gotten in certain spaces, like make sure you press your hair and make sure it's like, no, I'm good. Like take me, and I did take that advice for one job and I got the job, and reflecting back on it, I'm like, maybe I wouldn't have got the job. Michelle, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Because like, why would I want to work somewhere that is like focused on nitty gritty details and that like kind of, I don't know, hold me back in a way, I guess. That does help a lot, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And Aaron, I'm happy to stay on if other people
Sure.
wanted to. I can chat with people for another 30 minutes or so if that's of interest, but don't feel like you have to stay, right?
And Thomasina, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I wanted to ask her, I remember the family flicking. And I wanted to know if that's something that she would be interested in maybe doing at least one more time, because I saw how it affected the community and how happy the kids were, even the parents. That's something I would like to, see if she would be interested in doing one more time.
Yeah. I toyed with that question. So just on a personal, Thomasina was in the video, in the promotional video, and she really was supportive and has always been supportive of things I've done in the community. So one of the things that I struggle with that, so a couple of things. One, with the pandemic, I want to make sure that whatever is done and is safe. And I would like to do more. I would like to partner with the community to co-design what that could look like. So I am open to that, but it has to make sure that it is safe. Like that is my biggest, especially with this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Amber. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
And it's about basically when your interests are centered in like social justice and well, like my interests center around Black women, social justice, a little bit of developmental in the sense of Black women have a story that starts from like when we're children and it kind of follows us up until we're adults in the way of like our perceptions or what we think about ourselves, or like you said, even with your hair, like the racial like socialization stories we get told of how do we fit in and what our Blackness says about us is really strong. And so I know like a lot of times it's hard to get funding for that type of research, and maybe particularly in the developmental psychology aspect. So I was wondering if you had any advice on like if you have interest in that and you have to do it in a way that might not necessarily be done always, or might be unique where it's hard to kind of fight for what you want to have activism in.
Yeah, great question. So with the research project that I mentioned, I decided to do it under the umbrella of my nonprofit. And the reason for that is that, for example, when you're doing research under an academic umbrella, a third of that goes back to the university. I really wanted my project to be all funds go directly back to the community. So my team, we do not have compensation from the project. So the grant that we got literally covered the project, and it didn't. And I made that decision because I'm passionate about the work, but I had other income streams that I could be passionate about the work. And so when you're trying to sort of figure this out, one way to think about it is anyone doing this work currently that you could potentially partner with, or even if they don't have the space for partnership, even just learning from what their journey was, to figure out how did they get that funding. And you're right, that particular topic, it's needed, but there's not, the central space for it that I'm aware of. If you find one, definitely let me know because I'd be curious. And so I would encourage that first, is sort of really exploring who's doing that work and how did they get funding. And some may have gotten it, under the university umbrella, but I've made a decision in my career. I love adjuncting. I like it, but I don't want to do research under university. So I like with adjuncts that you can pick what course you want or not want to do. You're not tied in. And as you can see from my different book flowers, I don't necessarily like to be just tied into just one thing. And all of those things that I do are community oriented. They just connect in different ways. So I would start there, and also just looking at any organizations that are doing that work. So not just the people, but is there a specific organization that is doing that work? Because it just may be out there and you just may not be aware of it yet.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question was just how do you juggle all those different jobs? Because I feel like it sounds so fun to do different roles, but I don't know, like, when do you rest?
My husband's on the line. He might want to answer that. He accept me probably is like, she doesn't. So here's how I sort of break it down. So with teaching, I put myself at a cap. I only teach 2 classes at one time. So that's my cap. I really like to stay at one, but I usually make an exception. There's usually an overlap once a year. So I'm like, all right, I can do that. With consulting, I'm not consulting all the time. I consult when I feel like it. So that's different. Like, in terms of when I actually have projects. And so there's not necessarily that overlap as much. And then with SCRA, that's the majority of my time. It's the majority of my time. And I fit the other things sort of within that, because I wanted that to be, to be present, to be able to be supportive of initiatives like this matter. And so I take breaks, I take naps, I sleep on the weekends. If I'm not at competitive dance, my daughter, let's see, what else do? I Netflix, I yoga, I meditate, I pray. I do all these things that I need to do to feed into myself, because if I don't feed into myself, I'm not good to anybody. And I'm definitely can't be present in all the spaces that I'm present in if I wasn't. So I prioritize my well-being. And if a space compromises my well-being, then I change the space.
Is SCRA something that you found through all these different like experiences?
No, so SCRA, I got involved as a graduate student, actually. So as a graduate student, I was presenting my work at biennials, and that's when that interest emerged. After I finished my PhD, I became the Midwest Regional Coordinator for 4 years. And that I worked with a great team, Dr. Tonya Hall, Dr. Olia Glansman, and we worked together to annually put on the Midwestern Conference at MPA, and also other initiatives throughout the year. And from there, I transitioned to being the co-chair of Public Policy Council for 2 years. And so that has been sort of my transition of SCRA as a student and then as a professional. And when the announcement came that the executive director role was vacant, I got excited. Like, okay, I had been wanting to do another leadership role. I'd wanted an executive leadership role because I saw the value in being in that sort of position in terms of being able to impact change. It's an organization that I believe in. I also was excited by the challenge, because with the call to action and all of the other things, I see our organization being pivotal in this social justice work. But I also wanted to help us become the organization that other organizations strive to be when it comes to communicating the values that we have in the field, and those values being reflected in how we do the work and how we function as an organization. So I did not find SCRA, it kind of found me and my journey career-wise. And so, yeah, so that's how I started just getting to know SCRA. And I encourage you all too to just sort of, hey, what interests you have, and see which interest groups you can get connected with, to just learn more. And that has really been helpful for me in terms of the more I've learned, that has helped to sort of shape what I wanted to do. So for example, when I learned that I didn't want to do evaluation within the nonprofit space as a director, I just don't do it anymore, And it also is challenging too, when you have a resume that is a certain way and you want to transition into something else. And I had those pitfalls because a lot of times with my resume, it's like, oh, you research heavy. We want you to come in and do research. I'm like, if I'm gonna do research, the next space I'm doing research is I am leading that research. I got to a space where I didn't want to help advance another research agenda of someone else. I had my own ideas that I wanted to lead. And so why not do it?
Thank you.
Just a shout out. I put a couple links in the chat. There's a survey, it's kind of an eval for today's session, and also some spots for you to provide some feedback about what you would like to see for future sessions or future student representative initiatives. And then also a link to our next event, which is on Monday, February 21st, which is called the SR Monthly. And basically it's just a space for students to get together. And then we are seeking nominations for student rep that will start August 2021, when Jessica's term is over and work with me. So if you're interested, please check your email. Another email will be going out soon about that. But I think if you have to go, please feel free to stop off. And if you have other questions, I think Amber is available still.
Yeah. Aaron, are you okay if we stop the recording and we can just have a conversation? Okay. I'll just say a concluding statement to conclude the. So for those of you that stuck around, thank you for coming, joining, supporting, and asking. Definitely please follow up on the initiatives that Aaron has spoke about. I'm going to stop this recording now, and thank you everyone for your